This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm very, very grateful. With all this stuff going on, the oral argument over the Duncan case at the Ninth Circuit the other day, Joe Biden running amok again, wanting to curtail your Second Amendment rights with executive orders and all the other stuff, I thought it would be a great idea to have Chuck Michel, the volunteer president from the California Rifle and Pistol Association, a constitutional attorney from Michel & Associates, and the founder and leader of the Second Amendment Law Center on the show to help us get some perspective and hopefully help us be encouraged a bit. So Chuck is going to join me in just a second. Before he does, I want to let you know that My Patriot Supply has joined the list of supporters of GunGuyTV. So if you've been thinking about getting that emergency food supply, now is the time to do it. And you can help GunGuyTV at the same time. There are some great deals available to you. I will put the link in the description. All right, let's go talk with Chuck. Chuck, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on in short notice. Obviously, we did the oral argument in the Ninth Circuit, which is a key thing, and then President Biden running amok, wanting to destroy our Second Amendment with executive orders and bully pulpit and like that. What can you tell us about what's happening now in our Second Amendment world?
Well, as far as Biden is concerned, they're basically resurrecting an old strategy of the handgun control and Brady Center and all the anti-gun alphabet soup groups that want to make it as difficult as possible for anyone to get a gun so that they can reduce the number of gun owners and thereby reduce our political clout. But so they're going after dealers, which is very much along the lines of what they did years ago with this bad apple campaign against FFLs. Where they would single out FFLs who had relatively larger numbers of trace requests, gun trace requests from the ATF, and then claim that those dealers were selling illegally. Of course, there's no connection between the two. Typically, if you're in a high crime area, if your retail store is in a high crime area, you're going to get more trace requests because the guns are being sold in that area. It has nothing to do with the legality of the sale. And the dealers that sell a large volume of guns are going to have more traces because there's more guns being sold. But that type of explanation or that kind of consideration is not built into the gun ban lobby strategy here. So now Biden is swearing that is issuing this executive order that says he's going to have ATF is going to have zero tolerance for violations, which is interesting because I don't think I know of any FFL who has actually no violations. They used to violate gun dealers in Los Angeles County because rather than spelling out Los Angeles in the box that said the county on 4473, they would put LA. And ATF said, no, you have to spell it out, and issued a violation every time they didn't. So that's the kind of minuscule little paperwork error that can get an FFL in trouble. And I'm afraid that's going to be the kind of thing that the Biden administration ATF is going to be trying to use to shut gun retail stores down.
Do you think they'll be successful with that, or are they going to find themselves in court all over the place?
Oh, they will definitely be in court. A violation has to be willful in order for it to be grounds to revoke or discipline an FFL. But FFLs are going to want to get involved in some of the compliance programs like FFL Guard to make sure that they're hypersensitive and very, very much aware of all the things that can get them in trouble, and they make sure that they do things as right as possible so that they avoid that kind of trouble.
Wouldn't this be considered abuse at some point? I mean, you're abusing a lawful business. There's no way in the world you can run a business with the complex laws of the federal government, the firearms laws, without making small mistakes.
Sure, it's abuse, but Biden administration doesn't care. That's been the history of gun control. That's why we got the Firearms Owners Protection Act in 1986, because there were so many abuses based on hyper-technical violations that it was impossible to stay in business. And that's not just for retailers, that's for manufacturers, wholesalers, and the end user, the gun owner himself. That this is what it's all about. Red tape the right to death.
And I know you're not a politician. You're an attorney, but I want to ask you anyway, just out of what your thoughts are. We have the midterms coming up. Does this help the Democrats or hurt them when they're doing this kind of stuff?
I think it helps their core base, but it doesn't help. And they can spin it as crime control, and that's exactly what they're doing. See, the appeal to public safety and notions of we're going to pass another law and it's going to make you safer, to an unsophisticated voter, that's the kind of thing they buy into. In addition to, of course, a prepaid stamped envelope that you can mail in your vote and you'll get some free stuff, either a grant or extended unemployment or whatever other kind of benefits and entitlements that the federal government is now trying to make available to people to basically buy their vote.
I don't know about you, but I do know that a lot of gun owners feel powerless when presidents do this kind of stuff. What can the average gun owner do to fight this?
Well, in California, where I'm the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, they can join the CRPA and get involved in a CRPA local chapter. The CRPA has chapters throughout the state of California, and your local state association, or I should say your state association, will also have local groups no matter what state you're in. You just have to get involved. You at least have to be informed, and then you have to get involved, and you have to refuse to be demonized and refuse to accept this cancel culture wokeness about gun ownership that's all based on bought and paid for, Bloomberg spin machine talking points about why guns are bad and people who shouldn't choose to own one, even though it's the most effective tool for defending yourself or your family that there is. So, there's a battle for the truth going on out there, and folks just have to keep their ears open and stay informed, but also get involved. And you can donate to groups that are going to do the most good. You have to be careful. There's a lot of groups that aren't really putting the money into the cause and moving the ball downfield. But the Second Amendment Law Center is one, CRPA is another.
Are you seeing gun owners getting more involved, or are you seeing them complain a lot but not step forward to help?
Well, it's interesting because it's difficult. We are seeing anecdotally that people are getting more involved because the CRPA's chapters are thriving and growing by leaps and bounds, and that reflects the public's interest. Also, the training programs are exploding. There are so many more classes and so many more people taking all the different types of classes than before. Now, I don't know how much of that is because we're emerging from COVID and how much of that is because people are waking up to the threat to their Second Amendment rights. But there are more people involved, and that's a good thing.
What are the CRPA chapters, and how do they
work?
Well,
they're local groups that CRPA puts together and helps organize and gives the tools to stay organized and to function and have meetings and have not just meetings, but they do fun things too. That's allowed, but they're also plugged into the information sources that CRPA has, whether it's me about lawsuits or CRPA operations, or Roy Griffith, the CRPA lobbyist who's up in Sacramento, working in that rigged environment every day. He can tell them what bills are pending and what they can do to try and help fight those bills. And then they get educated. A lot of times the chapters themselves, once they're sort of empowered with the CRPA brand, can get involved and learn about what's going on in their local area, because the old saying is all politics is local. And that's true. The Democratic Party, frankly, has done a better job than the Republican Party of having fielding a minor league team, so to speak, a number of local candidates who they can then groom for statewide or even federal office. So by getting involved locally, you can become aware of those kind of things and influence those things. And some of these local races are swung by a couple of hundred votes. So it's really where in California, at least, where a lot of things are rigged.
And I'm feeling a little remiss because I'm not involved in a local CRPA chapter, so I guess I need to repent or perish.
Shame on you.
Get going. What are you doing? Hey, what's going on with the Ninth Circuit? I watched the oral argument the other day. I'd give you my impression, but it would be the impressions of a layperson who knows nothing. You certainly are not that. What are your thoughts on the oral argument that occurred the other day for the magazine ban here in California?
Okay, so that was the Duncan case. Virginia Duncan, we know and love her from San Diego, is the lead plaintiff in that. CRPA is also a plaintiff. That's been CRPA's case since day one. The Duncan case, I need to kind of put this in context. The Duncan case is first in a line of Second Amendment cases that are making their way through the Ninth Circuit. The Duncan case is unique because not only did it win in the trial court, the U.S. District Court, it also won in front of the three-judge panel, which is your first level of appellate review in the Ninth Circuit. And that caused some of those judges on the Ninth Circuit to panic, and they petitioned for an en banc hearing, which is an 11-judge panel of judges that then reviews the decision by the three-judge panel. The Duncan case challenges the ban on the importation or possession of magazines that can hold over 10 rounds, standard capacity magazines. But the Duncan case is just at the front of the line. It's important to consider that the Duncan case, while the Duncan case is pending, the CRPA's Rohde case by Kim Rohde, the Olympic shooter, and the Roop case, which is the challenge to the California black rifle ban, which is, those are all much further along in the Ninth Circuit, but they're stayed pending the result in Duncan. And also, for those who are tracking all these cases, the Miller case that we just got from Judge Benitez down in San Diego, which declared the California so-called assault weapon law unconstitutional, that is now stayed behind the Roop case, because the CRPA had the Roop case in the Ninth Circuit since 2017. So you've got Duncan, Rohde, Roop, Miller, and who knows what other little cases, Second Amendment cases the Ninth Circuit is holding on to, that all are bottlenecked behind Duncan. And then most curiously is that the Duncan case really should be stayed, in my view, pending the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case, which the Supreme Court has taken. And the reason is that in all these cases, the common theme, the common question that has to be answered is, what is the appropriate level of scrutiny that a court is to give to a law and to the government's justification for a law when they're evaluating a Second Amendment challenge? Do they defer to the government? Do they give the government the benefit of any doubt? Do they assume that what the legislature says in its findings, that this law will make us safer, is true? Because usually, if you actually look at the evidence, what the government says to support these laws is not true. And that's what came up yesterday in the en banc hearing. The government was, the state of California was trying to make the same kind of evidentiary claims. They're trying to prove that this law is justified banning the possession of these magazines. And it was kind of funny to watch as he claimed out of one side of his mouth that these magazines are almost never used for self-defense, but that doesn't. So that means it's not protected by the Second Amendment. But on the other hand, they're used on only a few crimes, but that's enough, those few crimes, to justify banning them. And one of the judges, Judge Van Dyke, I think it was, called them out on this and said, that's like saying, heads I win, tails you lose. And that's the game that the state typically plays. They make stuff that they adopt whatever the legislative findings were, and those findings are typically written by the gun ban lobby and spoon-fed to the legislature. Findings are what they recite to justify the law they're passing. So they'll say, magazine ban is going to make us safer. Well, based on what? In the underlying case, in the Duncan case in the trial court, they were relying on an article in Mother Jones magazine to support their case. So this is the kind of crap that the states try and get away with, not just in Second Amendment litigation, but having been a lawyer that's gone up against multiple government agencies in multiple contexts, I can tell you this is the kind of baloney that the government pulls all the time to justify their actions. Regardless, so the hearing yesterday was all about whether or not the state actually could justify the law, but also what was the burden that the state should be held to when you're trying to determine whether or not it can justify the law. That's a common thread that all these cases have, how to evaluate the constitutionality of a gun control law.
That seemed to be a main thrust from a number of the judges to talk about the level of scrutiny. In fact, questions were asked of the state attorney a couple of times, and he said, well, they didn't think that they should abandon the two-part or three-part or whatever balancing test that they do. And I'm curious what your impression was. It seemed to me, like I said, it's a layperson's impression, but it does seem to me that every time we have one of these cases, although the judges are supposed to be selected at random, it kind of seems like the Chief Justice is putting his thumb on the scale and selecting them to make sure that we can't possibly win. And that's sort of the impression I got yesterday.
The mix came out 7 Democrat appointees and 4 Republican appointees, 1 from Bush and 3 from Trump. And so thank God Trump appointed a lot of judges to the Ninth Circuit. It's about 50-50, but we still came out 7-4. Now, if they vote along party lines, so to speak, which is the safe bet, unfortunately, then we lose 7-4. But again, the Supreme Court is addressing this issue of the appropriate standard of review. They want to reject this balancing test, this 2-part test. Of course, the state wants to hang on to it. It's real easy for a biased judge to put their finger on the scale and make the case come out any way they want it to. But if they go with the originalism test, the test that I think the Supreme Court is going to adopt in the New York State case, then that's a much different approach to evaluating a law's constitutionality. And it requires the government to actually prove with hard evidence that what it's saying is true about what the results of a law will be or about why law is needed.
I did love going back to what you said about the whole, the use of these magazines for self-defense is rare, and so we should be able to ban them, but the use of them in crimes is rare, and so we should be able to ban them. was quite interesting. The rarity was against us on our side, but for them on their side, which didn't seem to make any sense.
And the really discouraging thing is that the appellate court is not supposed to be reevaluating factual evidence. That's the trial court's job. They take a look at that evidence. They're not supposed to second guess whether the judge evaluated the evidence correctly, because he was there listening to the testimony and looking very closely at the evidence, and that may or may not be completely contained in the record. So for the appellate court to second guess, so it's like Monday morning quarterbacking. That really is not the way the system's supposed to work. And so this is why people don't need to be afraid of challenges to. Anti-gun people don't need to be afraid of challenges to gun control laws, because all we're doing is making the government prove its case. Prove that what you are saying is true. Prove that passing some law that bans this gun or that gun part will actually make us safer, and that right now we're less safe because there isn't that law. They can never do that.
Is it? Now you mentioned the bottleneck. I don't think it's a bottleneck. You mentioned the cases stacked up at the Ninth Circuit. It seems to me that the fact that they're logjam. I could look at that 2 ways. I could look at that and be discouraged, or I could look at that and say, well, actually, that's kind of positive because they're holding them in abeyance while they wait to see what happens at the Supreme Court. If they didn't hold them in abeyance and they just settled them, wouldn't it be more of a project to bring those things back up again if the Supreme Court comes back and says, hey, guys, you didn't settle those right? I mean, is it a good thing they're log jammed, or is it a bad thing?
Well, it kind of depends. Look, if Duncan comes down against us, which it may very well do, but there will be dissents. And that kind of a fractured en banc panel is something that the Supreme Court looks at when they decide to accept the case or not. And they have, by the way, a New Jersey case on standard capacity magazines that has asked the Supreme Court to be heard. And in fact, the Second Amendment Law Center and CRPA both submitted amicus briefs in that case. But what the court could do, the Supreme Court could do, is take several other cases that are queued up and accept them for review and then hold them in abeyance pending the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case. And I'm hopeful that that's what they will do. And so Duncan will not be a final decision. We will take that to the Supreme Court. We will ask the Supreme Court to hear that. And hopefully, the odds of getting a case accepted by the Supreme Court are very small. And we know that because we've been trying to get a Second Amendment case back to the Supreme Court for 10 years. And there's probably been 50 cases that were proposed and the Supreme Court turned down. But now that they have one, and they know, I think, that they've got to address the standard of review question, they may take a number of these other cases that are pending throughout the country and just hold them until after they decide the New York State case.
Chuck, recently we've seen, with the Supreme Court in particular, threats by the Democrats, threats by the Biden administration to pack the court, a desire to do that. I think the filibuster is hanging on in the Senate by a thread. And if that's gone, they may well try to do that. And as a result, we've seen a few cases not related to the Second Amendment come out of the Supreme Court that have been decided in an interesting sort of way. And then it's been my observation that the court tends to take these very narrow bites out of things and not decide too broadly. We're hanging a lot of hope on this case from New York with the Supreme Court.
We sure are.
What's the chances of the court just deciding this thing so narrowly that it doesn't do us much good?
It's a possibility. It's a possibility. I frankly can't see how they can avoid addressing the standard of review in the process of addressing whether or not there is a right to bear arms outside the home and to get that license to bear arms without having to demonstrate a special need. And that's what the New York case is all about. But you're right. I mean, it's possible they could avoid the whole thing and just make some broad pronouncement that says it's constitutional or it's not constitutional to require people to prove a special need to bear a firearm in public. I know there are a lot of judges. I know that with the Justice Thomas would lose his mind if they did that. And so would several of the other justices. I don't think they're inclined. Kavanaugh, he's already adopted the originalist approach in one of his dissents. I think there's it's just a matter of whether it's 4 or 5 judges or what that would insist on the standard of review being addressed.
How many friends do we have on the court currently? I think once before and another time when we were talking, you mentioned that we had 4 friends. We kind of need to have 5. How many do we really have on the court?
Well, now we have 5 and maybe 6 if Roberts comes along. So I think we're in better shape than we've been for a while after Justice Kennedy resigned and then Justice Ginsburg died. We got 2 more friends on the court, but Justice Kennedy was in the way as a swing vote and a very soft vote on the Second Amendment. And even Justice Roberts didn't seem committed. But now with Judge Barrett on the court, we seem to have a pretty strong majority.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you're never going to talk to me again. You're a court watcher. You're an experienced constitutional attorney. If you had to lay odds on it, what are the odds that the Supreme Court settles this case in such a way that it does us a lot of good?
Oh, I'd say it's about 80% in our favor now.
That's very encouraging. Because I got to be honest with you, it's hard to watch the courts do the things they do and not feel kind of deflated, particularly when you watch the oral argument yesterday.
Tell me about it.
I know, I get it, and I hear it from viewers all the time. I hear it all the time where they feel sort of deflated, and so the instant reaction when you say that there's a court case that the Supreme Court has taken is, oh, they're gonna throw us under the bus again. But that's why I wanted to ask you, what leads you to that conclusion? What makes you think we have that good a shot? Counting votes,
also the dissents that were, when a case is presented to the Supreme Court and someone asks the Supreme Court to review the lower court decision, it takes 4 Supreme Court justices to take that case and review it. It's discretionary. They don't have to take cases, and 9 out of 10 cases they don't take. They just leave the decision that was decided in the lower courts alone. But now, so the fact that they've taken it is, in the first place, is a really good sign. And now that we have, I'm counting votes. It's the judicial temperament has changed. The dissents that were written by Thomas and Alito and Scalia while he was alive, and other judges, when they decided not to take a Second Amendment case for review, were rather scathing. And they called the court, other members of the court, out for not taking the case, not resolving these outstanding Second Amendment issues that have been flying around, flopping around in the courts for 10, 11 years now. This should have been resolved quite some time ago, and it's long overdue. And I think the dissents that these other judges have written when cases were not accepted really indicates that they feel that way too. This is long overdue for review. So those judges have expressed their opinion. They have let it be known that they think that the wrong standard of review is being applied, and that the Supreme Court really needs to set the record straight.
Well, Thomas and Alito, as you say, have been very vocal about it. Kavanaugh has already decided this once in a circuit court level, didn't he?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Amy Coney Barrett and Judge Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch?
Gorsuch is a little bit weird, but he's, I think, strong on our side. And also Coney Barrett, she did a dissent where she adopted this originalism test too. So they've telegraphed, if not in the dissents from a denial of a petition for a grant of certiorari, if they turn that down, Supreme Court turns that down, there are dissents. But also in these lower court cases, when some of the justices in the Supreme Court now were sitting on the lower courts, their dissents in those cases tell you the way they're thinking too.
So you mentioned it takes 4 to take the case and 5 to win. So here's the inside baseball question. You've got some specific justices, I would say, just based upon what you've said, Alito and Thomas and probably Kavanaugh, who would want to take this case to settle it and finally give the Second Amendment some teeth. Whoever the fourth justice is, would they take it? I mean, politically inside, would they take it if they thought there wasn't a chance of settling it the way they want?
Well, that's a very good point. For years, we only had 4 solid votes to win with Justice Kennedy on the fence. And so our friends were voting against taking a case because they knew they had the 4 votes to take it, but they didn't have the 5 votes to win it. So they didn't want to take the case and lose it. So a lot of times they didn't take these cases because we didn't have that 5th vote. But now the fact that they've taken the case, I think, telegraphs that we do have 5, maybe even 6 votes with Roberts. And it may be Roberts who's trying to keep things narrow, keep the holding narrow. But I mean, still, all the writing is sort of on the wall, or in their earlier and other decisions, that they agree with the originalist approach, and they agree that the right to bear arms, carry arms, doesn't end at your doorstep. Your right to self-defense does not confine to your home. So we should get a good result out of that.
If they come out and settle the standard of review, and they go back to something akin to the originalism view that is in Heller, does that set us up for a renaissance in the Second Amendment going forward?
Well, I don't know about that. The thing that scares me, frankly, is that there are groups out there filing lawsuits all over the place, thin lawsuits, not the robust kind of well-prepared, and those, I guarantee you that one of the briefs that get filed in the Supreme Court is going to point out all these lawsuits that have been filed and say, this is what they think. They think that they're going to get it so that the Second Amendment protects, the shipment of a fully automatic to your doorstep without a background check. That's the kind of fear-mongering that they're so good at when they're in the legislative arena, and they will be pulling out all the stops to scare the crap out of all the Supreme Court justices about what a broad ruling how it might play out. So I don't know that there will be a renaissance. There will certainly be new challenges to a lot of laws. And the state, this is why, this is what everybody should be behind this. The state is going to have to, they can't just take bald talking points from the Bloomberg spin machine and recite that as a reason to pass a law. They have to actually justify the law with hard evidence and show that some kind of a restriction on a Second Amendment, the exercise of a Second Amendment right, is justified by a problem, a societal problem that the government can address with a specific response. None of these laws really do anything about public safety.
You have left me, honestly, Chuck, with a little bit of a lift in my shoe, and I'm really grateful for that with your view that this case in the Supreme Court could come out on the positive side for us. There's so much negative out there. And, every day in the news we see negative. What about this fight right now encourages you?
If we get that reset, that hard reset from the Supreme Court, we will be able to force the state to justify a lot of infringements that it's been getting away with passing based on spin, based on unfounded claims of a law that a law increases public safety. And so all those things are subject to review if we get that opinion from the Supreme Court, and I think we're going to. So that gives me a lot of hope. The cover of the CRPA's magazine when Justice Barrett was appointed was her picture, kind of Obama-sized. Remember the Obama poster from his campaign with the colors? We did that to her and had hope underneath it. That really kind of sums it up. That was the vote we needed. Assuming everybody votes the way we think they're going to, that was the vote we needed to make the difference in the Supreme Court, which will make the difference every place else.
Hallelujah. Let's hope that's the case. Is there anything we didn't talk about that we ought to cover?
So the CRPA has been for months running a column in its magazine called True Organic, which is about cooking wild game and the benefits, the health benefits of wild game over processed meats, farm raised meats. And so we're putting a cookbook together for a Christmas gift as a fundraiser, and we're collecting recipes. So send your recipes to wild game recipes to CRPA, and we'll give you a little credit, and we'll all have some fun and a couple of great meals.
I love it. That's a great way to wrap things up. Okay, like I said, I'm half Italian. I love to eat, so I'll actually buy the cookbook. And if my wife and I can come up with some great recipes for you, we'll send them to you. Chuck, thank you very much for coming on the show again. I really do appreciate you doing so in such short notice. You've enlightened us a lot, and I think you've left us buoyed a little bit, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, cross all your digits.
I don't know if I can do that, but yeah, okay.
We salvage the Second Amendment, and all of our freedoms and our children's freedoms are preserved.
That's the goal.
The country's at a turning point. There's a battle going on for America's soul. It's not just about the Second Amendment, although the Second Amendment is the tip of the spear. There are all kinds of things being pushed by other folks that we need to fight back against.
Indeed. And if you haven't joined CRPA, I urge you to do so. I will put a link in the description. Please join, please contribute, please help. And check out also the Second Amendment Law Center. I'll put a link there as well. Chuck, thank you so much. Have a great week, and you stay safe, okay?
See you, Joe.
All righty. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm super grateful for everything that you do. I hope that this interview has encouraged you as much as it's encouraged me. I'm looking forward to that Supreme Court case, and I'm looking forward to the battle as we continue it. Stick around. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to keep fighting for the Second Amendment, tooth and nail, and I hope that you do too. Have a great week. Wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.